So let's begin with a little meditation. And I'll try to motivate for the morning and afternoon sessions. First, begin to quiet your mind. Bring it successively into a more subtle state by watching your breathing. Think as your aim, I'm going to try to develop this mind right now while watching the breathing, to concentrate, to be able to understand wisdom, to benefit sentient beings so that I can practice the Bodhisattva's deeds, exchange myself with others. So for that purpose, I'm going to watch and be aware of when I'm inhaling, when I'm exhaling, the points when it changes direction, and let go of all other thoughts. Everything is empty anyway. So I can attend to the conventional problems at another time. Now bring your attention further inward to your heart chakra. Just watch your mental consciousness. Let go of your attention to the breathing. Withdraw your attention away from the faculties, the eyes, the ears, the nose, taste, the body consciousness. By watching the content of the mental consciousness, the thoughts that come, try to see the nature of the mind, the conventional, clear light nature. Between the thoughts, the very presence of the thoughts implying the nature of the mind as clear light, the fact that the thoughts can come and go. Whatever appears to your mind, try to recognize it as merely an appearance within the conventional nature of your mind. Turn your attention away from the content. Try to perceive the subjective mind within which it's arising, the nature of that mind, clear light. Keep alertness whenever your mind begins to wander to other things. Seeming constant presence of your body is being perceived by your tactile consciousness. Let go of that. Bring your attention inward like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs inside. And recall that we have been, since beginningless time, taking rebirth within cyclic existence under the control of our ignorance, our ego-grasping, self-cherishing thought. That somehow we've created a condition, cause in the past, karmic, to meet the teachings, Mahayana teachings, on both method and wisdom, and that we've created the karma to have this perfect juncture, a life of leisure and endowment that can be used to create the cause of many future human rebirths, to develop the realizations that can help us to really fulfill the meaning of being human, to develop bodhicitta on the basis of renunciation, wisdom that realizes emptiness. This clear light nature of the mind has accompanied us throughout all our lives. The mind is not inherently stained by our delusions. They can be removed. They're transient, temporary. If we don't familiarize with the antidotes, begin to try to temporarily at least eliminate them, they will continue with their same force in future lifetimes. We'll go through the same problems that we've encountered in the past. This life will continue to encounter in the future. There are no pleasures of cyclic existence that we have not experienced before. Power, pleasure of the senses, being totally pleased egotistically with love and affection of others, reputation. This lifetime, I have the opportunity to go beyond that. All living beings who have been our mother, have been my mother numberless times in the past, as kind, depthlessly kind as my present mother has been through numberless lives, who we don't recognize as such right now. They're also circling in cyclic existence. Although it may not occur to us usually, we owe them an incredible debt due to their kindness. Now is the time to begin to try to repay that debt of kindness, not simply by helping them with material, food, or medical problems this lifetime, although that's important. But the only way that we can really repay their kindness is by leading them out of cyclic existence. First to liberation for some whose karma is not amenable to the Mahayana path at first. Others led to the Mahayana, to full enlightenment. But to do that, I myself must have the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience of the path. I must myself attain enlightenment. So for that purpose, out of some similitude of a bodhicitta motivation, wishing to achieve my highest potential of enlightenment for the sake of other living beings, solely for their sake, I'm going to participate today meditate with an open mind, a fresh mind. Particularly meditating on the ultimate wisdom that can help us escape from samsara, the necessary ingredient besides the motivation that can bring about enlightenment, the wisdom of emptiness. So with that thought in mind, first of all, before we recite the Sutra of the Perfection of Wisdom, the Heart Sutra, try to recognize initially the object to which we are most confused at first here, our ego, our self. Recognizing our aggregates, our body and mind, feelings, discriminations, and so forth. We think I, and immediately there's a sense of a findable, inherently existent self-identity. See if you can instigate that sense of I. Think of some situation when you've been unjustly accused, or as in my case, justly accused and feeling indignation, a sense of I appearing to your mind. Very subtle within your mental consciousness. A real I, not one that's merely labeled on our aggregates, a sense of a real I that's appearing to our mind. Let go of other thoughts that interfere with that, conceptualizing thoughts. Here, what we mean by ego is not what Western psychology might mean, but the sense of the I that appears innately at birth without the need of any intellectual training. An I that seems to be appearing from its own side, not merely labeled conceptually by our mind. Watching the way that that I appears, if you can. See if you can notice the way that the mind responds to that appearance. Whether the ignorance that grasps to that misdirected wisdom actually assents to that, grasps it as though it were true, perceives it as though it were true. Both of these are objects of negation. The appearance of the I that seems to be appearing, let's say. The appearance of the I is, of course, there. Also the ignorance that's grasping to it. That's our real enemy. With a thought today, I'm going to begin to recognize and overcome this ignorance grasping to the I. Let's chant the praise to the wisdom gone beyond and read the Heart Sutra. Ma samjhe me shera paru chin ma ke minga nam ke ngo so Chu Chen Tu Sum Galwe Yum Yala Chaksel Tadyata Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Thus did I hear, at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no objects of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Tadyata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgati Bodhi Svaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you've indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharitvatiputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. So, so before we begin, any questions? Diana, you have some questions?
From the final, or are there some people who have
I think some people haven't taken the final yet, so we'll refrain. Don't give. No, we're afraid you won't come back. Get some coffee. Yes, Venerable.
Is ignorance a mistaken consciousness? Is that how you define it?
What do you think? Is ignorance a mistaken consciousness? What do you mean by mistaken consciousness? You mean, remember when we studied mind and mental factors and also ways of knowing, you could be referring to trulshe? You mean like something which is mistaken with respect to its appearing object? Ignorance doesn't have to be mistaken with it referred to its with respect to its appearing object. It's a wrong consciousness. It's a lokshe, we might call perverted consciousness or wrong consciousness. So it's confused about the object that it's actually engaging. Can ignorance exist in the sense consciousnesses? What do you think, Frank? Can you have ignorance can exist in the eye consciousness, the residue of the eye consciousness?
A mirage or something like that. The retinas are correctly perceiving the visual sight, but you're interpreting it wrong.
So that ignorance is within the eye, the residue of the eye
I don't
consciousness?
think that would be in the eye consciousness. I guess that would be in the mind that perceives that consciousness and then attaches meaning to it.
So that ignorance, in that case, that would be in the mental consciousness. Can you have ignorance in the, Carrie, what do you think, in the sense consciousness, your ear consciousness, your tactile consciousness? You don't see how?
Is a wrong consciousness?
Ignorance is, it's a wrong consciousness, might be mistaken, depends on if the consciousness is, what I'm getting at is if ignorance is only a mental consciousness, it's not in the sense consciousnesses. If it's, can ignorance be direct perception? I have to think about that. If it's a conceptual mind, then it's necessarily mistaken with respect to its appearing object, but that's not so important here. The main thing is that it's a wrong consciousness. If it's conceptual, it's going to be, and a wrong consciousness is going to be, erroneous, make an error about the object that it's conceiving. So it's said to be a misdirected wisdom, ignorance. It has a certain kind of discriminating quality to it, but it's discriminating in the wrong way. It's kind of like misdirected wisdom, is mentioned in Mind and Mental Factors sometime. Sometimes it's kind of interesting, like when I think I've mentioned before, if we have very strong desires, and we might feel, in Dorji's case, it was sort of guilt or, sort of we feel, this is not right. we can actually develop some divine pride. Think this itself is kind of has a certain aspect also of a misdirected kind of perception. We want to be happy, so we're grasping at something as a source of that happiness, which if we analyze with our Dharma wisdom, we can start to see will never be able to give us the happiness we want. So this is one of the functions of ignorance. It's not just the appearance to the mind. Let's say if we talk about the selflessness of the person, it's not just the appearance of the I. That's not called ignorance. Or the appearance of outer objects as truly existent. That's not called ignorance, is it? It's our response to that, and that ignorance doesn't abide within the sense consciousnesses. Ignorance is something that abides within the mental consciousness. It's a response to that appearance. It's a misdirected wisdom that's grasping at it.
Might look at some reality and see it differently, right? A hell being might see one thing, and a ghost being might see another thing. Isn't that error somewhere in the sense consciousness that's perceiving that? I mean, how can the two sense consciousnesses perceive, or are they retinas seeing the same colors and they're interpreting it as different objects?
Well, it might be, if you're talking about humans and the different people are colorblind or something, that would be, you would say there's an error due to a defect in the faculties. There are different kinds of sources of error. But the fact that different beings of different realms would perceive things differently, they can still have conventional valid cognizers. Preta can see the water as pus, and God can see it as nectar, and humans will see it just as water. That's not considered a source of error within the faculties. The fact that those things are seen differently is due to our imprints, our karmic, our different karma being born in different realms. The dependent arising, which is conventionally having some consistency, not contradictory with emptiness, that dependent arising appears differently to different beings. To the Buddha, perceiving the water or perceiving this room, there's no particular inherent appearance. It doesn't, as some people might think, appear as a celestial mansion or something pure from its own side. But the Buddha perceives everything in the same taste. From the Buddha's perception, everything as in the same taste of emptiness, but knows how we perceive things, so could communicate with us, could manifest here and appear to be a body and know exactly how the dependent arising is appearing to us, be cognizant of that by knowing our minds, not because it appears naturally that way.
Rising, I'm apprehending it correctly according to my sense faculties because it already...
You're apprehending it in a valid way according to your sense consciousnesses, but our mind grasps that appearance as though it were true, the way that it's appearing. Bodhisattvas, let's say arhats, who've, in the Hinayana path, who've eliminated ignorance from their mind completely, Arya beings on the pure bhumis, the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, who've eliminated ignorance completely from their mind, still for them, even a 10th level bodhisattva, when they're not in meditative equipoise and emptiness, phenomena still appear due to the imprints of, two ways. They appear, the phenomena appear due to their karma, and they have an appearance of true existence due to the imprints that have been left in our mind, the obstructions to omniscience. They appear to be truly existent, somehow findable within that. Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned in his Lan Rim Chemo, Geshe Sopa Rinpoche this last summer mentioned several times this, that we may have mentioned before. A very famous quotation that's mentioned several times in different teachings Lamas refer to. Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned, in terms of the order of development, first there is the grasping to true existence of phenomena, and then the grasping to the true existence of the person, or grasping to the inherent existence of the person, if you want. Does that make sense? In order to develop the ignorance that's grasping to this self of persons, first you have to perceive the aggregates upon which the person is imputed. And as soon as you perceive them with an ignorant mind, say the body, let's say thinking Venerable Angie, we don't perceive her mind. We may have an idea, thinking about what she's saying or something, that she has feelings or discrimination or wisdom or whatever, but we see her venerable form and infer some of the other aggregates, and on the basis of that, we grasp immediately upon the aggregates as being truly existent. And in our own case, to conceive of yourself, you first have to have some cognition of your aggregates, even if it just be your mental consciousness, you're in concentration. Then, on the basis of that, there can be developed within the consciousness the grasping at the self of the person. Does that make sense? So in terms of development, first there's a grasping to self of phenomena, and then there's a grasping to the self of persons. Does that make sense, Georgie? In terms of realization, however, in terms of how these things are realized, Lama Tsongkhapa said, development of realization, first one realizes the selflessness of the person, and then the selflessness of phenomena. It's kind of interesting. You might say, well, how can that be? It's a different, does it make sense to you? Completely doesn't make any sense? Yeah. So in terms of when you actually have an insight into emptiness, it's said that the insight of emptiness, realization of emptiness, arises first with respect to the selflessness of the person, looking at the self of the person, the appearance of that self. Say there isn't a real self of persons, but it appears to the mind, and the mind grasps to that. It's said that that is easier to realize than the selflessness of phenomena in terms of actual realization, development of realization. So that's why, perhaps, one of the reasons why the Buddha taught in the Hinayana path mainly emphasized about the selflessness of the person. Without first tasting that, at least getting a sense of the gross selflessness of the person, it's hard to go much further. So when we talk about the Hinayana path, although in the scriptures, the Hinayana scriptures, it doesn't mention very explicitly about the emptiness of phenomena, as we've talked in some other courses, it is implied there. The main practice there is meditating on the selflessness of the person, as is implied in the Heart Sutra, right? When Shariputra asks Avalokiteshvara, how do the bodhisattvas train in the perfection of wisdom? And Shariputra is supposed to be the expert on wisdom in the Hinayana. Excuse me. And Avalokiteshvara says that the bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of the aggregates also when they're meditating on the perfection of wisdom. They meditate on the emptiness of the aggregates also. So in terms of realization, if in the Hinayana path, if they're meditating on what they believe is the selflessness of the person, first of all, it's usually the gross selflessness of persons, right? the person being devoid of a self-substantial existence, self-substantial, self-supporting, substantial existence in that sense, something that is not merely imputed. Excuse me. I have a small frog in my throat this morning. Out, damn frog. Who said that? Not frog. Out, yeah, who was that? Othello or something?
That's a partial credit. Somebody.
Yeah, you get extra credit. Excuse me. So if we're thinking about really making some progress in understanding emptiness, thinking about what Lama Tsongkhapa said, we have to put some effort at the beginning. Of course, understanding about emptiness in general, because all phenomena are empty of true existence. But in terms of our actual experience, first, putting a lot of effort into trying to recognize the object of negation in personal selflessness, in our own continuum, the conceived object of the view of the transitory collection. Remember what the view of the transitory collection is? What do we say? What is it called in Tibetan? Does anyone remember? Do you remember? Jiksok la tawa. Jik is like when we say Jikten, that means, Jikten means world. But Jikpa means subject to disintegration, destroyable, Jiksok means collection, which sometimes in Sanskrit is kaya. Like when we talk about dharmakaya and so forth, kaya doesn't only mean body, it can mean collection that can serve as some kind of sense of body. Tawa means view. So there's a lot of controversy among academic Buddhists, because the Sanskrit term for this view doesn't seem to jive with the Tibetan translation of it. In Sanskrit, I think it's Satkaya Dristi. Dristi means view. Kaya means sok, means collection or body. But Sat usually means to be, or sometimes real when it comes in a compound. But the Tibetans take a different etymology, and from not just from their own view, from the you can find in the various lower schools, it seems like it does have the meaning. This prefix sat in Sanskrit does have the meaning of subject to destruction. You can actually find in the Sanskrit dictionary some words like this. So this is a particular kind of ignorance. This is one of the five afflicted views, right? The view of the transitory collection. What does it take as its referent object? Do you remember? What is it actually observing? Its observed object. Do you remember, Don? The view of the transitory collection? This is our main enemy.
Aggregates I and mine.
So that's what the lower tenets, some of the lower tenets might say it observes the aggregates, but the Prasangika says, no, it doesn't observe. What is it actually referring to? What is its first, that it's going to be making the mistake about what is its referent object? We say mikul, remember? It's actually referring to the actual conventional I that does exist. So there's a lot of discussion about this in the lower tenets. all the way up to Prasangika, everyone seems to think the referent object is something like the aggregates or the collection of aggregates. Prasangika says that's not, as you can see from the Buddhist, from the sutras and so forth. If you have a chance ever to study the Madhyamaka text by Chandrakirti and Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to it, Chandrakirti very brilliantly explains and shows how, through the sutras and other things, and the Prasangika point of view, the actual referent object of our ignorance, that which is really functioning, what it's observing, what it's referring to, is the conventional I. And it conceives that conventional I incorrectly to be what? Truly existent or inherently existent. The reason that we might call it, understand why the term view of the transitory collection is because, just as Lama Tsongkhapa said, in terms of development of ignorance in our mind, first there is grasping to the self of phenomena, the aggregates. Without apprehending the aggregates, there's no way that you can apprehend the self, because the self is imputed upon the aggregates. Start to make some sense? So you first, that's why in a sense the yogis and the meditators and scholars say that first, pardon? Yes.
No, just in terms of the grasping at true existence of, that's the first one in order development. The grasping at the aggregates.
Grasping at the true existence of phenomena. Yeah. First you develop grasping to the... Before you can develop grasping to the self of the person, first there's going to be existing in your mind developed grasping to the self of phenomena, your aggregates, the basis of designation.
When you die and you're in the bardo, do you have
If you could
aggregates? Well, see, when you pass, the consciousness passes out of this body, do you have aggregates then?
You have
Some
wee
sort of
aggregates.
Wee ones.
Wee ones, very subtle aggregates, like so subtle that can pass through most matter. I think what did they say? What are the only things that cannot pass through it? Through, pardon? I'm not sure. Vulture's peak, something like that. So anyway, so very, very subtle matter. And in terms of Tantra, as is sometimes mentioned, Lama Tsongkhapa even mentioned, and the Lamas mentioned even in terms of talking in the sutra sense, certain things from Tantra, such as the subtle mind and subtle wind. So if we talk from that point of view, which has a certain connection with the sutra explanation, especially if we assume the bardo, there is the subtle wind and subtle mind continue after this lifetime, and they become, as soon as we pass out of this lifetime or we die, we are born into the bardo with a slightly grosser wind than the subtlemost wind, and a slightly grosser mind, a bardo mind, bardo body and a bardo mind. The bardo body may take the form of the next karmically determined rebirth. An infant of that, small child of that type. So the bardo being does have a sense of, they do have a consciousness and feelings and so forth. They have a sense of I. They do perceive things. They develop fear and attraction and so forth. So they do have ego grasping at that time too. It manifests again within that bardo mind. When you're in the deepest clear light state, of course the ignorance is unmanifest. It's there as just as potential, perhaps. So in terms of our meditation on emptiness, if we want to try to follow, as Avalokiteshvara said, the bodhisattvas go beyond meditating on the selflessness of the persons. They then meditate on the selflessness of the aggregates, the the basis of imputation of the person. But first, we have to get familiar with the meditation on the selflessness of the person, because it's that which is first, in terms of succession, in terms of development of realization, that's realized first. So that's why we put a lot of effort into that. It's not as though the emptiness of phenomena, other phenomena, is not important. In fact, we do get to that. But even if we talk about not just the emptiness of the gross person, not just the emptiness of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. Here, when we meditate on the emptiness of the person, we try to observe the subtlemost appearance of the I, the subtlemost object of negation, as being an I which is truly existent, self that's truly existent. How do we do that? Do we try to conjure up what that I would be? No. We try to actually observe, not just imagine how such a truly existent I would be. We try to actually observe how it's actually appearing to the mind. We don't have to conjure one up. If we're conjuring up how the truly existent I would be, oh, it's findable, truly existent, we're not going to be finding the subtlemost object of negation. So we can't be satisfied, as is said in the text, with just some words from the text. Truly, the I seems to be truly existent, and just say that. We actually have to observe the I and see how it seems to have that quality of findability, not a quality of seemingly being merely imputed, just a conceptual phenomena.
The conventional I that we first grasp at is truly existent from the Prasangika view, that I think is not the same as the aggregates, right?
Conventional I is not the same as the aggregates, right?
So it's the imputed I. And is that the same as the object of negation?
Pardon me?
Is it the same I am seeing as the object of negation?
No. That I does conventionally exist, and we're not refuting that I when we meditate on selflessness of persons. Although the appearance of that I, the conventional I, the merely imputed I, the merely imputed Dan, as soon as I impute Dan, let's say not talking about our own, the object of our own jikta, the view of the transitory collection, but just selflessness of persons in general. If I view you, the ignorance grasping to Dan is not called the view of the transitory collection, right? For me. Because that view of the transitory collection only views my own self-identity and perceives it to be truly existent. When I view you, it's still called self of persons, grasping to a self of persons, that ignorance. It's not grasping to self of phenomena. But it's not called jikta. It's not the view of the transitory collection. Right? We talked about this before. So, indeed, if I were to grasp at you, first I impute Dan. First I observe your aggregates, in case usually the body, and there will be grasping to those as truly existent as soon as I've perceived your aggregates, and then I recall, oh, this is Dan. Oh, that looks like Dan. Off in the distance, there's Dan coming. Or I impute Dan onto that, and as soon as I've imputed Dan, the conventional Dan, it appears as though Dan is actually existing from its own side. So there'll be two appearances: the appearance of the conventional, merely imputed Dan, superimposed, encrusted with the appearance of a truly existent Dan. And for our minds, inseparable. We cannot separate those two appearances. Whenever we have an appearance, whenever we name something and there is the appearance of the conventional phenomena, the merely imputed phenomena, that there will be simultaneously the appearance of that phenomena as being truly existent. So it's that appearance of true existence that's the problem, and the conceived object behind it, the actual thing that we're thinking exists, the truly existent Don, that's the object of negation. Or if in our own meditation, the sense of our own self, that the reality that our mind is grasping to as a real, truly existent I. Let's take a little break for a couple minutes, and we'll do some more meditation. Okay? Okay, so let's immortalize Don's question rather than having it in the tea break. Okay.
In 12 entrances, it refers to, in the path of meditation part, it refers to no mind. And then in the 18 dhatus, it refers to no mind element and no mental consciousness element. Mm-hmm. Can you help me understand the difference between the mind element and the consciousness element?
So you're just talking about the dhatus now, right?
Well, is the mind element and the no mind in the 12 entrances it refers to no mind.
Okay.
In the 18 dhatus refers to no mind element and the consciousness element. Are those three different things, two different things? They're all the same.
So when we talk about the 12 elements, or said the 12 entrances rather, have you heard of that before, Venerable? 12 entrances? The ayatana. In Tibetan we say keche. So the Buddha explained, first he talked about the 5 aggregates, sometimes he talked about the 12 entrances to divide up a person, and sometimes talked about, and all phenomena can be divided into the 12 entrances to consciousness, and sometimes he talked about the 18 dhatu, that can include all phenomena. There's other ways of dividing up phenomena. You can divide up phenomena into also the 6 elements, the 4 physical elements of earth, water, fire, and air, and then consciousness and space. Also, Nagarjuna mentions the person is merely imputed on these also. There's other ways of dividing up phenomena. But here in the Heart Sutra, the Buddha is mentioning the 5 aggregates, the 12 entrances, and the 18 dhatus, or I say Avalokiteshvara is mentioning explicitly. So the 12 entrances are the 6 faculties, one of which is the mental faculty, right? The mental faculty is not the brain, as we said many times. The mental faculty is a previous moment of any of the other consciousness, any of the consciousness, including mental consciousness. Then there are the objects of those faculties, the combination of which, say, if you have an eye faculty and an object of eye, a visual form, can give rise to, they are an entrance to, eye consciousness. So they're called entrances. And the ear consciousness, along with its corresponding object, sound, can give rise to ear consciousness. So the mental faculty, because we're talking, that's the only thing that's going to have mental quality here, right? Because of their objects, we talk about the objects being those things that are exclusively objects of mind. So like impermanence and other kinds of things. So that faculty, when we talk about the entrances, we say there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. Those are the 5 aggregates. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. So that's going to be mind faculty, right? Mental faculty. No visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no objects of touch, and no phenomenon. Or phenomena, depending on if you make it plural or whatever. So mind there is talking about the mental entrance. So it's referring to the faculty of mental consciousness, right? So that can include all mental phenomena. Then when you talk about the 18 dhatus, there is no mind element, and so on up to, and so that's going to talk about mental dhatu. And then if you go all the way through the objects, and then a third layer, the actual consciousnesses that are developed, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, taste consciousness, tactile consciousness, and mental consciousness dhatu. Okay, so that I'm not sure in the Abhidharma, when you talk about the 18 dhatus, there's some discussion in whether in the 18 dhatus the mental dhatu, when we talk about the faculties, whether that's exactly identical to the mental ayatana, which is what called here no mind, right? No mind entrance. Whether that's the same as mind element. It might be slightly, maybe you categorize it differently for means of enumeration, but in one sense it could be exactly the same.
Similar to the eye consciousness or the mental consciousness.
Which?
This reference here, no eye element, is the eye consciousness, or is it the eye itself?
So this is talking about the dhatu, so that means eye faculty. And then so it's going up to, and so on, up to and including no mind element. So that means the first 6 up to the faculty of mental consciousness, which is like what was here just called mind a minute ago. Mind faculty or mind entrance. And then it's skipping over all of the objects of those, meaning visual form and so forth, phenomena, and then it's going to the third group of 6, and only mentioning the last one, mind element. No mental consciousness element, because you've got eye consciousness dhatu or element, ear consciousness dhatu. Those are the things that are actually being developed after the entrance, due to the entrances, the 12 entrances. So the word consciousness implies that that's something that is developed because of those entrances. It's the third layer of 6. Yeah?
So the mind faculty can be any one of the 6 consciousnesses. And then, when you talk about the immediately preceding moment of consciousness, that gives the eye consciousness and mental consciousness, is that only the immediately preceding moment of mental consciousness, or can that also be the immediately preceding moment of any of the 6 consciousnesses?
I'm trying to remember. The immediately preceding moment, the immediate condition, is generally a preceding moment of that same substance of consciousness that gives rise to the next moment of consciousness. So that would be an immediate moment of that, I believe, of that continuity of consciousness. So if you're talking about the immediate condition of eye consciousness, one moment of eye consciousness was a previous moment of eye consciousness. But, or if you talk about the immediate condition of a mental consciousness, the previous moment of mental consciousness would be that which allows the mental consciousness to arise again, the next moment. But if you talk about the mind faculty, that would be any of the consciousnesses, any moment of the previous moment of consciousness of any of the 6 consciousnesses can act as the empowering condition for that, the faculty for the mental consciousness to arise the next instant. Okay, let's leave that for a second. So we were talking before about meditating on the emptiness of the person. Is it okay? What happened? Mouse? You see the mouse over there, son? I thought you were looking over there.
I thought someone walking up and
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to try to do again is to meditate on this first meditation. in order to, the selflessness of the person. So what we want to try to do is identify with a quiet state of mind the sense of I, your own sense of I. In so doing, you might have to first identify your body and mind, because you impute, in terms of development, you always have to perceive the aggregates first. There's not the appearance of the I ever without having first referred to, identified the aggregates. But once you found the I, you don't have to keep on thinking of the aggregates. That I will appear then, once it's been designated by the mind. Not only will the designated I, the imputed I, appear, but mainly what will be appearing most vibrantly to our mind is a sense of a truly existent I within our consciousness. Not one that's merely labeled. How would a merely labeled Frank exist? Not as any kind of substantial way, sort of like our ego, when we're hurt. It seems like there's something really solid and findable and real there. Whereas I, Frank, Venerable Swayambhu, Dorje, the way that we actually exist is merely as names imputed to this collection of parts, much differently than our mind conceives of, as though there were real soul behind it, something substantial and real and findable. That's how it appears to the mind. So that's what we want to first try to observe. And then in this same session, we'll try to use a very simple logic, although in other courses we'll study other logical reasons. As Nagarjuna's text on wisdom gave many, many reasonings to show that that phenomena are empty, that the self is empty. But here we'll use the very famous reasoning of the emptiness of one and other. That is to say, if this I did exist the way that it appears, that's the first step, to recognize the object of negation. Then to establish in our mind some kind of certainty, what we call the pervasion. If the I did exist like this, as true, as findable, existing from its own side, it would have to be true, findable, inherently one with the aggregates, or true, findable, other than the aggregates, inherently other than the aggregates. And we'll try to recognize what that would mean. If it were truly one with the aggregates, the way that this mind is appearing to be truly existent is that it's independent. It's set up by itself. So that if the I were truly, if we use that word, or inherently one with the aggregates, it would have to be utterly one with the aggregates. And as there are 5 aggregates, there would have to be a multiplicity of I's. It would have to be 5 I's. Or because we have a continuity of one I, a sense of one I, ego, there would have to be one aggregate. Even if you like to try that on, you think, oh, the I is just the mind, as the Svatantrikas believe. Still, that mental consciousness itself has parts, moment parts, and it has virtuous minds and non-virtuous minds. There would have to be many kinds of I's according to that. So we can exclude the I being inherently one with the aggregates when we're watching that. The I can't be one with the aggregates. Actually, the I is just imputed upon the aggregates. It's not identical with the aggregates itself, because then if the I and the aggregates were identical, the object imputed and the object of imputation, the object of designation, would have to be identical. Instead of saying my body, you'd have to say my. There'd be no sense of my body, something different than me, if the object of designation were the self itself, right? Does that make sense? Have you heard that before? If the basis of designation were the object. We think the parts are the object. The aggregates, one or some collection of the aggregates are the person. Then the object imputed that we know, even though we don't recognize it as being imputed yet, that which we call I would have to be identical to the parts. So you couldn't say my hand, my feelings, because it would be you. Those things would be you. So you can exclude by various reasonings like that, the I as being inherently one with the aggregates. If the I were inherently other than the aggregates, it would have no connection with the aggregates whatsoever. It would be set up without relationship to them at all. So that if you stuck a pin in your hand, you wouldn't say, oh, that hurts me. Kepchen Ling Rinpoche used to give example about this, putting an example of a pin in the finger. You think at that point, I have been hurt. So the sense of an I that's completely independent of the aggregates whatsoever, that's wrong also. Eventually, you can always sort of mediate in the meditation to think how the I actually exists is just a concept or name imputed upon the aggregates to try to get some perspective. So that imputed I is not something completely independent of the aggregates. It does depend upon the aggregates, but it is not the aggregates themselves. So it's not one with the aggregates. It's not other than the aggregates. Just concentrating on those. If it did exist, it would have to be either identical to or different from the aggregates. Remember, that's something you can understand. If anything exists, Anna Victoria, what do you think? If anything exists, it has to be either identical to this cup or different than this cup. Would you agree to that? Because there's no other choice. Everything in the world other than this cup is other than this cup, is different than this cup. The only thing that's the same as this cup is this cup. So if you choose anything like that, let's say the aggregates and the self, either if the aggregates and the self do exist, the truly existent self, they would either have to be identical or they would have to be different. In this case, because the truly existent self is what we're looking at, it would have to be truly one with the aggregates or truly different with the aggregates. When you get a sense that the self, the I, is not truly one with the aggregates, not truly different than the aggregates, and you recognize that if it did exist, it would have to be one of those two, then it can dawn in your mind the understanding that the I doesn't exist at all like this at all. Use an example that you're familiar with, something that you've been mistaken about sometime, maybe like a mirage. Any of you encountered a mirage lately on the road when you're driving down? Frank, when you're driving the highway? Carrie, maybe when you're driving your bike down a hot day, do you see, looks like water on the highway ahead? Has happened in the past. Or if you've had experience of seeing a reflection in the mirror and thinking it was something real, you think, oh, your room is really big, and then you see it's actually a reflection in a mirror. The room is really quite small or something like that. How things can appear one way as real, but be empty of that. So use that example and see if at the end of that meditation, you can actually be left in a state of just what we call a non-affirming negation, mere vacuity. That's what the word shunya. Okay, empty, an emptiness, which is the mere lack of that I, a certainty that I does not exist at all the way that it appears. That ego that we've been grasping to. So here, when you're meditating in this way, you're not negating the ignorance yet, although that's going to be eroded over time. That is something that is something that does exist. The ignorance does exist that's grasping to that, but you're not meditating on taking that as your object of negation here. You're using reasoning to negate the object that it's grasping to, the sense of I. Okay? We've done this many times before, but just to make it a little bit clear. Is it okay? Any question? Okay, so let's sit and meditate. So if you're like me, you need to calm your mind. Just again, bring your attention inward. Watch your breathing for a few sets of respiration. Take your attention away from your eyes, your ears, your body consciousness, and so forth. And then bring your attention further inside to your mental consciousness. If you wish, as we're familiar with this, try to observe the nature of your mind, the clear light nature between the thoughts, which is always there, irrespective of the content of the mind. By concentrating on that, you can calm the mind from its discursive thoughts. Just let them dissipate by not paying attention to them. Try to recognize whatever thoughts are coming as objects of the mind and let go of them. Let go again and again, even of your imagination of the nature of the mind. That's merely a mental appearance within the actual nature of your mind. Within that quiet mind, let the thought of I arise. Although it might sometimes be associated with your body or your mind, the basis of designation, those are just intellectually formed concepts of the I. They're not the innate sense of the I. See if you could instigate it with the appearance of that I by thinking of something in which you've been unjustly harmed or accused, or you feel very strongly desirous about something. The sense of I need that. I want that. Sometimes difficult to appear to the mind so that you can relish the next time that you are in an ego-enhanced situation, when your ego is really going out of control. Think, oh, this is my opportunity to cut this, to practice like cutting the ego. With a quiet mind, try to identify this object of negation, the I, that is not merely a label, but the sense of I as though it existed from its own side, was findable, was inherently existent, truly existent, true, real. The I whose knees hurt, the I who's thinking about lunch, the I that's lonely or the I that's pleased. If someone says your name, the sense of I that arises. Although there's no sense of a conventional sense of the I without having first appeared the aggregates, the object, the basis of designation. Still here, you don't have to observe, don't pay attention to the aggregates, just observe the object based upon the aggregates, the sense of I. Something very, very subtle, actually, maybe more obvious when you've been instigated with anger or accusation or desire, jealousy, miserliness, laziness. Try to sense how this I is appearing. not merely a controller of the body and mind as the self-supporting, substantially existent I, but the subtle object of innate grasping. When someone has bad lung or depression, that sense of I at the heart. When you're irritated, when you're in love, when you've been unjustly accused, you can think I, let the word resound and see what appears to your mind, or your name. See how the mind, if you can, if your mind is quiet enough, see how the mind responds to that appearance. Does it accept that? Does it go along with that? Does it grasp to it as existing the way that it's appearing? If the I existed as it appears, not just a name, concept, but existed in some findable way, existing from its own side, it would have to be truly one with our body and mind, our aggregates, or truly different, inherently different than our body and mind. See if you can develop some understanding of that. Any two things have to either be the same or different. Here we're talking about the aggregates and the sense of a truly existent I. If it existed, it would have to be either identical to the aggregates or different from them. Here it's not just a relative difference from the aggregates. If this I were truly existent, it would have to be truly different than the aggregates, not just nominally different. If it were truly different from the aggregates, it would have no relationship with them whatsoever. Some entity that wouldn't respond to or have any relationship to the aging of our aggregates, the experiences that they had, the feelings. If this I were inherently different than the aggregates, it would have no relationship with them whatsoever. That is contradicted by our actual experience. We do say, I am getting old. I've gained some weight. I've lost some weight. I'm smart. I'm dumb. I feel good. I feel lousy. That hurts me. That pleases me. If the I, as it appears to be truly existent, if it were truly different than the aggregates, we would not have those experiences. There would be no relationship with the aggregates whatsoever. But we definitely have a relationship with the aggregates. If the I as it appears within our actual experience to be truly existent, not just imputed, if it were one with the aggregates, it would have to be utterly one, identical to the aggregates. And as there are many components of the self, even the components themselves have parts, components. Mental consciousness is itself composed of virtuous and non-virtuous, 51 mental factors, primary consciousness. Temporal moments of consciousness are its parts also. There would have to be a multiplicity of I's, all existing inherently, findable from their own side. If the I were one with the aggregates, the object imputed would have to be the same as the basis of designation. We wouldn't say my body. We couldn't say my body. There wouldn't arise that concept at all. Because the body would be the self. We couldn't say my mind. Observing the I again. Appearing to be truly existent. If it did exist this way, it would have to be either one with the aggregates, inherently one, or inherently different from the aggregates. It is neither of those. So think this way, the I that's appearing to my mind, it's caused me problems all the time that I think of as my hero, my heroine, my controller, my real self. That which instigates my anger, my depression, my low self-esteem, my attachment. This I is empty of true existence, does not exist that way, because it is not truly one with the aggregates and not truly different than the aggregates. It is empty of true existence. Like a reflection in a mirror, appearing one way and empty of that. Like a mirage. Appearing to be findable within its appearance, its basis of designation, but actually empty of that. See if you can give rise to that wisdom consciousness, inferential cognizer, we say, that recognizes, to some degree realizes, the self is empty of inherent existence. What appears to the mind then is a mere vacuity, a mere emptiness. Nothing affirmed, but induced by this analysis. So there's a surety, a certainty that the I does not exist the way that it appears as true. When the appearance loses its clarity or the certainty of what is being meditated on, again analyze, observe the sense of the I, let it arise again, and due to your familiarity with the reasoning, again induce this certainty that it doesn't exist. It could not exist in the way that it's appearing. Just as a real face cannot be found in the reflection itself. And bring your attention back to the present. How was your experience, Carrie? Pardon me? Oh, you should have gotten more sleep last night. I thought that was okay. So that means the experience was not was more of a sleeping experience than a...
40%.
Okay, so that's a good observation. When we try to meditate, we have to, in order to be successful in meditation, we have to take care of the body and mind for that purpose. So, not just to be, I said, like Shantideva says in much detail in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, but also in the compendium of trainings, this Shiksha Samochaya. He emphasizes how the Bodhisattvas do have to take care of this vessel, boat, but for the purpose of preserving it for others, to use it in the relative sense, and as a vehicle for meditation. So this is a good example, yeah. We need to, if we want to make progress in our meditation, we have to have the right conditions. So one of them is a healthy body and one that has enough sleep. So don't stay up late watching videos. How was your meditation, Mark?
Similar.
No.
But not devastating.
Oh, okay. No.
And actually, I
Trust you? Okay. Okay, yeah.
so I do often lose the
Okay, so there's another kind of problem. So say, for instance, you've observed the eye to some degree. You kind of say, wow, it really does seem like it's not just, can compare it, like Lama Tsongkhapa said, compare it with just a merely imputed eye, conceptual, sense eye, merely labeled. That's all the eye that existed. This looks much different than that. So observing that, you need to have concentration to keep that in mind for some time. So it's said, the yogis say that they sometimes meditate on just keeping that in mind for a long period of time, until maybe even months, until it appears so confidently and clearly to your mind as, not negating it yet, just observing it in a way that so that you make that clear, because then the consequence of its absence will be that much more vivid from the mind. Otherwise, if you never touch the object to be negated, like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the beginning of the section on wisdom, and in many other situations, unless you actually identify that which is to be negated, you're never going to be able to recognize its absence. There's the impact of that. So you have to recognize that. Also recognize how the ignorance is observing that and assenting to that, the conceived object behind that. So then you use with that quiet state of mind, which is essentially, you could be just trying to develop shine at this point on that. You try to analyze within that quiet state of mind, without inducing other kinds of conceptual thoughts or distractions, how if it did exist this way, get familiar with this logic over time. It would have to be identical, inherently, one with the aggregates, or other than the aggregates. And then also try to, sometimes in meditation, in a general way, or in post-meditation, think how it does exist. How does the self actually exist? Not the inherently existent self. Is it one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates? The conventional self. What do you think, Venerable? You have to get that. Oh, okay. I thought she had her. This must be a Scottish way of thinking. Sometimes people think like this or. What?
Neither. The conventional self, you mean?
Yeah, the conventional self. Is it one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates? So you're like the Samityas, one of the lower Vaibhashika schools, says the I is unexpressible as one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates or something like that? You're saying it's both or something like that? What do you think, Frank? Is the I, the conventional I, that does exist, is it one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates?
Neither one with the aggregates nor different from the
If
aggregates.
two things exist, the aggregates exist conventionally, the self exists conventionally. If two things exist, they have to be either identical or different. Actually, the conventional I is not identical to the aggregates. It's different than the aggregates. But within that difference, they can be one nature. They can be the same nature. The I is of the same nature of the aggregates. But in that sense, just as I said before, you can't observe the I without observing the aggregates. So the same way you know that the flower and its impermanence are of one nature. You know, you can't observe the flower separate from its impermanence as though that was something you could separate from them. They're of one nature. So the self is the same nature as the aggregates, but it's not the same as the aggregates. It's different from the aggregates. It's a concept that's imputed upon the aggregates. But if you talk about the truly existent self, the one that's appearing to our mind, if it existed, it couldn't have that kind of relationship with the aggregates, being different from the aggregates in name. It would have to be utterly different, because it seems to be set up by itself, existing from its own side. So if it was existing from its own side and different from the aggregates, it would be utterly different from them. It would be set up, existing truly by itself. Not the way that the conventional I is different than the aggregates in name, but still the same nature of the aggregates. The failing of the lower tenets is to think that the I somehow is the aggregates. Although it's imputed, they say the I is imputedly existent, still there is, within the tenets of the lower school, if something is imputedly existent for the lower schools, it has to be imputed on something which is substantial. So in the end, the basis, the substantial thing that you impute the object on, could be given as an illustration of that thing. Like a forest is just imputedly existent on the trees, but there is some substance of trees that it's imputed on. So you could give an illustration of the forest, even though it's imputedly existent, just a concept, as the collection of trees. So for the lower school, some of them say the collection of aggregates is the person, or one of the aggregates is the person. So why don't we take a, yeah, done.
What can we use the term in the nature of something in the nature of something? Does it means that, let me ask, does it mean that they aren't the same, they're different, but one would not be without the other?
It can mean that, but let's say this paper is of the same nature of the paper, so in that case they are the same. But the paper and its impermanence being the same nature means that if one is absent, the other would be absent. If the impermanence of the paper were absent, the paper would be absent. If the paper were absent, the impermanence of the paper would be absent. Not just impermanence in general, because there could be impermanence of other things. So they're of the same nature. They're inseparable. Like that. So this afternoon, after we have a little lunch break, we'll talk more about what Avalokiteshvara suggested to Shariputra after having some understanding of the selflessness of the person. Then the Bodhisattvas recognize the emptiness of the aggregates also. So we'll spend some more time on that.